I had been living in my house for a little over 6 months when the strange noises began. At first, I thought it was just the usual sounds any old house makes, the creaking of wood as temperatures shift or the wind pushing against the walls at night. But something about these noises felt intentional. It usually started around 2 a.m. A low thudding sound. Not too loud, but steady. Almost rhythmic. Thud, thud, thud. I lived alone, and at that hour, the smallest sound could feel deafening. I would sit up in bed, heart pounding, straining my ears. But the moment I tried to focus on it, the sound would stop. Just like that. I chalked it up to anxiety or maybe even my overactive imagination. After all, I just moved into a new town, new job, new home. Everything was unfamiliar. It made sense that my mind was trying to fill in the gaps. But then the sound changed. It became more deliberate. Less like random knocking and more like something or someone dragging something heavy across the basement floor. I'd hear it scraping slowly for a few seconds, then silence. Some nights it would happen once. Other nights it went on and off for nearly an hour. The odd thing was, whenever I worked up the courage to actually go down and check, everything looked normal. The boxes I had left down there were untouched. The water heater, the washer and dryer still. The concrete floor showed no signs of being disturbed. Still, the unease crept deeper every night. One evening, my neighbor, an old woman named Mrs. Hawthorne, stopped by to drop off some fresh-baked bread. We chatted for a bit, and I casually mentioned the noises. Her face went pale. "Don't go looking too deep into this house's history," she said with a forced smile. "Some doors are better left closed." I laughed it off, assuming she was just being dramatic. But that night, the knocking returned, and this time it was followed by a sound I hadn't heard before. Breathing. Faint, raspy breathing. As if something was standing just beneath the floorboards, exhaling slowly, deliberately. I froze in bed, clutching my sheets as if they could protect me. I wanted to believe it was the wind again, maybe a vent making odd sounds. But deep down, I knew this was different. The following day, I inspected every vent in the house, every crevice where air could travel. Nothing. I even called in a handyman to check the HVAC system. He found no issues. But that night, the noises escalated. Thunder rumbled outside as rain lashed against the windows. A storm had rolled in, knocking out the power. The house fell into an eerie silence, the kind that makes your ears strain for any little sound. I lit a candle and sat in the living room, trying to calm my nerves. And that's when I heard it. Not from below this time, but directly behind the basement door, knocking. Loud and slow. 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. I stared at the door. It was shut, as always. But something told me something was on the other side. I picked up my flashlight, heart racing, and stepped toward the basement door. Each footstep echoed through the quiet house. I reached for the doorknob with a shaky hand and slowly twisted it open. The basement stairs descended into darkness, the air colder than usual. I stood at the top for a moment, shining my flashlight down, but I could only see the first few steps. The rest was swallowed by shadows. I thought I heard movement below, like the shuffling of feet or claws. I couldn't go down that night. I just couldn't. I closed the door, locked it, and leaned my back against it for support. My chest heaved as I tried to make sense of what was happening. Was I losing my mind? Was someone hiding in my basement? Or worse, was something else down there? All I knew was that I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was trying to get my attention, and I was starting to believe it had been waiting for me all along. The next morning brought little comfort. Sunlight streamed through the windows, birds chirped in the trees, and yet the sense of dread from the night before clung to me like a second skin. I hadn't slept. Couldn't. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind outside, made me flinch. The memory of those knocks behind the basement door haunted me. Still, I knew I couldn't keep running from it. I had to investigate properly while it was daylight. I grabbed my flashlight, a crowbar I kept in the garage, and a utility knife just in case. When I opened the basement door again, the same cold air rushed out, wrapping around me like a warning. I flipped the light switch, and thankfully, the basement bulb flickered to life this time. I descended slowly, counting each creaky step like a countdown to something inevitable. The basement was mostly bare, save for a few cardboard boxes, some old paint cans, and rusted tools I'd never gotten around to organizing. But something felt different. like the layout of the room had changed ever so slightly. Then I noticed it. One corner of the basement, where a tall wooden shelf stood pressed against the wall, had a subtle draft. I walked closer and felt a distinct flow of cold air seeping through a small gap. That shelf had been there since I moved in. I hadn't thought to touch it before. It was covered in cobwebs, heavy with dusty books and forgotten knickknacks. But now it was suspiciously placed, like it was hiding something. I started unloading it piece by piece, setting each item on the floor. Once emptied, I braced myself and tried pushing it. It groaned under the effort, but finally shifted to the side. And there it was, a crudely boarded-up section of the concrete wall. The wooden panels were old, dark with age, and oddly nailed in a pattern that didn't seem like typical construction. Carved into the wood, faint but visible, were strange symbols. Spirals, crosses, and glyphs I couldn't recognize. They didn't look artistic. They looked ritualistic. My heart thudded against my chest. I wasn't just dealing with an old structural issue. This was something else. I knelt down, flashlight in one hand and crowbar in the other, and began prying the boards loose. Each creak of the wood echoed in the basement, loud and raw. As the final plank came off, a small metal door was revealed. Rusted hinges, no handle, but still intact. It was just big enough for a person to crawl through. I examined the frame and saw more symbols etched into the surrounding concrete. Unlike the ones on the wood, these seemed freshly scratched, like someone or something had been here more recently than I would have liked. I reached out and pressed my hand against the door. It was cold, unnaturally cold. I knocked gently. The sound echoed beyond the door into empty space. That's when I knew it wasn't just a false wall or a storage area. There was a hidden room behind it. I stood up, pacing the basement floor, trying to rationalize what I had found. Why would anyone seal up a room like this? What were the symbols for? A previous owner hiding something? A survival bunker? Then I remembered Mrs. Hawthorne's warning. Some doors are better left closed. I went back upstairs and scoured the attic for any old records, blueprints, or documents that might explain the house's layout. To my surprise, in a weathered box labeled Original Owner 1946, I found a leather-bound journal and an antique brass key tucked between two crumbling books. The journal belonged to someone named Thomas Archer, the man who first built the house. His writings were rambling, paranoid. He mentioned hearing voices from the walls, dreams of a door that called to him, and a ritual to seal away the hunger. The last page read, "I locked it. I sealed it. But it still whispers. Forgive me." I stared at the key in my hand. It looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Without fully realizing it, I walked back down to the basement, clutching the key like it was my only link to the truth. I held it up to the hidden door, and just below the rust, a small keyhole came into view. I hesitated. Then I slid the key in. It fit. I didn't turn it. Not yet. But I knew one thing for sure now: this door wasn't just a part of the house. It was meant to be hidden. And I had just found it. I must have stood there in front of the door for a full 5 minutes with the key in the lock, my hand trembling, caught between instinct and obsession. Every cell in my body screamed not to turn it. But curiosity, dangerous, magnetic curiosity, overpowered the fear. I turned the key. A dull, mechanical click echoed through the basement like the final tick of a clock reaching its hour. The hidden door creaked slightly, not opening fully, but enough to release a burst of air that smelled like damp earth, rust, and something faintly metallic, almost like blood. I backed away quickly, covering my nose. Whatever was behind that door hadn't been opened in decades. I braced myself, then pulled the door open the rest of the way. It revealed a narrow passageway carved into the ground. The floor was made of dirt and stone, uneven and old. There were no lights, no wiring, no sign that it had ever been part of the house's official structure. Just a long, descending tunnel that vanished into darkness. I stood at the threshold for a moment, letting the flashlight's beam try to pierce the void ahead. The light only went so far before it faded into black. The silence beyond was total, oppressive, almost like the space itself was swallowing sound. I took one step in, then another. The temperature dropped noticeably as I walked further. The walls were cool to the touch, but not made of concrete, more like hard-packed soil with old bricks and stones randomly embedded in spots as though someone had dug it by hand and reinforced it in a hurry. The further I went, the tighter the air felt. Heavy. Ancient. About 20 feet in, I came to a sharp bend. Just past it, the tunnel opened into a small underground chamber. It was roughly circular, the ceiling low, barely taller than me. My flashlight beam swept over the contents, and what I saw nearly made me drop it. There were objects. Not modern. Not decorative. Primitive. Rusted metal tools arranged neatly on an altar-like stone slab. Bones, small ones, maybe animal, maybe not, placed in piles along the edges of the room. Old glass jars filled with murky liquid. And in the center of the room, a stool with rotting leather straps tied to its legs and arms. It wasn't just a room. It was a ritual chamber. I took a shaky step closer, inspecting a broken frame resting against the far wall. Inside it was a photo, black and white, cracked from age. A man with hollow eyes stood in front of what looked like this very chamber, holding the same brass key I'd found. I flipped the photo over. Written in shaky handwriting, "He watches through the cracks. Don't speak his name." That's when I noticed the symbols again. Carved not only on the walls but also on the floor, spiraling outward from the center in strange patterns that made my eyes ache if I stared too long. I felt something shift in the air, like pressure suddenly rising. Then I heard it. A whisper. So faint I couldn't make out the words. I spun around, flashlight swinging through the room. I was alone, or I was supposed to be. The whisper came again, this time followed by a soft scratching sound from deeper within the wall. I backed away toward the tunnel, panic rising in my throat. The journal entries came flooding back. I sealed it. It whispers. Forgive me. What the hell had I just walked into? I scrambled back up the tunnel, heart pounding, lungs tight. Every step felt like I was being watched. I didn't stop until I was back in the basement, slamming the hidden door shut behind me. I turned the key and yanked it out, but the door wouldn't lock again. No matter how I tried, the mechanism seemed broken. Or maybe something else had changed. I pushed the shelf back in place, hoping to hide it again. Out of sight, out of mind, right? But I knew better. The door had been unlocked. The chamber had been entered. And whatever was sealed inside for all those years now knew it was no longer alone. That night, the house was no longer quiet. The breathing returned. Closer. Heavier. Not beneath the floorboards this time, but on the stairs. And in the morning, the key was gone. I didn't sleep that night. How could I, after everything I'd seen and heard? I stayed in the living room with all the lights on, holding the crowbar like it could protect me from whatever I had just unleashed. The basement door remained shut, but I couldn't stop staring at it. Not even blinking. As if the moment I looked away, it would creak open on its own. By dawn, my body was exhausted, but my mind was still racing. I kept replaying the whispers, the photo, the old journal entries, and that single, terrifying phrase, "He watches through the cracks." I didn't know who he was yet, but I was certain now something was down there. And it knew I had found it. Around mid-morning, I stepped out for air, hoping sunlight would clear my head. I visited the local library to dig into old property records. Most of the information about my house was typical, built in 1946, passed through 4 owners, minimal renovations. But what stood out was this: no one had stayed longer than 2 years. The most recent owner, a man named Gerald Whitaker, had vanished. Declared missing. His case had gone cold 3 years ago. There were no records of him ever selling the house. Shaken, I left the library and paid another visit to Mrs. Hawthorne. I needed answers. She looked visibly uneasy when I told her what I'd found. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she motioned me inside and closed all the blinds before sitting me down. "I was hoping you wouldn't open that door," she whispered. "Every house in this neighborhood is ordinary except yours. We all know it." She told me the story her late husband once shared back when he was a boy. Rumors of a watcher in the earth. A presence buried beneath the land long before the house was built. Some said it was a cursed soul. Others believed it was never human to begin with, an entity that fed off attention, off awareness. That's why it was sealed. That's why the Archer family, the original builders, had carved protection symbols and hidden it behind layers of deception. "It doesn't hurt you if you don't know it," she said. "But now it knows you know." I returned home with a weight in my chest. I avoided the basement all day. Every time I passed the door, I felt pressure in the air, like the house itself was holding its breath. Then night fell. And something changed. At 1:33 a.m. I woke up gasping. My room was freezing. Not just chilly, but ice cold, as though winter had suddenly taken hold of my house. I could see my breath as I sat up, shivering, the air thick with static. Then came the sound. Not the usual thuds. Not whispers. but a low, guttural voice so faint it was like it was vibrating inside my skull, not in the air around me. It said one word, open. My heart stopped. I bolted from the bed, flipping on every light. But the moment I reached the hallway, they all went out. One by one. Popping. Dying. Until I was standing in pitch black. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Climbing the basement stairs. I turned toward the basement door and saw a crack of red light glowing from beneath it. That's when I knew. The entity wasn't trapped anymore. The key hadn't just unlocked a passage, it had loosened something that had been waiting. I backed away, but the door handle began to rattle. Softly at first, then violently. I ran to the front door, trying to escape, but it wouldn't budge. It was like the house had become a sealed tomb. No signal on my phone. No light. No sound except for the relentless shaking of that basement door. Then silence. And just as suddenly, the door slowly creaked open. But nothing stepped out. Just a long shadow that spilled into the hallway. A wrong shadow, twisted, tall, shifting as if it had a life of its own. And at the edge of it, in that red glow, I saw eyes. Not human. Not animal. Reflective like mirrors, yet empty. Watching me. Studying me. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Then the voice came again. Closer this time. You let me in. The door slammed shut on its own. The lights came back. But the damage was done. I hadn't just found something in the basement. I had invited it into my world. The house changed after that night. It no longer felt like home. The moment I stepped into a room, it felt like I was intruding on something else's space. The walls seemed to breathe, subtly pulsing in the corners of my vision. The air held a constant chill, no matter how high I turned up the heat. But worst of all was the feeling, that oppressive, constant presence. It wasn't just watching me anymore. It was with me. I tried to ignore it, to go about my day like normal. But the little things started piling up. My coffee mug would be moved from one side of the counter to the other while my back was turned. Doors I knew I closed would be open. Lights would flicker even though I had replaced the bulbs. My reflection in the mirror would sometimes lag, as if the image of me wasn't quite in sync. At first, I thought it was paranoia, lack of sleep, trauma from opening that cursed door. But soon, the house made it undeniably clear this was intentional. One morning, I found every cabinet in the kitchen wide open, not just ajar, yanked open like someone had torn through them in a panic. Inside one, scrawled on the wood with something black and sticky, were the words, "You see me now." I fell to the floor, hyperventilating. I couldn't move for minutes, and when I finally did, the words had vanished, like they were only meant for that moment. It didn't stop there. The whispers returned. Not from the basement anymore, but from inside the walls, from behind the mirrors, from my dreams. Every night they'd grow louder, forming fragmented phrases I couldn't fully understand. He waits. Blood remembers. The hunger is older than names. I started recording audio at night, hoping to catch proof, to assure myself I wasn't losing my mind. On one of the recordings, at exactly 3:03 a.m., a voice, not mine, whispered directly into the microphone. "Let me wear your skin." I dropped my phone. I couldn't bring myself to listen to the rest. Sleep became impossible. Every time I drifted off, I found myself back in the underground chamber in my dreams. Only now it was alive. The walls would shift and breathe. The shadows would reach for me, and in the center always stood that figure. Tall, silent, faceless. He never moved, but I could feel him pulling me closer. One night, I woke up standing at the basement door, hand on the knob, ready to open it again. I hadn't remembered getting out of bed. I hadn't remembered walking there. I started locking myself in my room at night. But even that wasn't safe. 3 nights in a row, I woke up to scratches on my door. Not animal scratches. Fingernail scratches. And above the handle, the wood had begun to splinter as if something had been trying to get in. Desperate, I returned to the attic and tore through the journal again. There had to be something, anything, about how to stop it. One entry stood out now more than ever: the hunger cannot be killed, but it can be forgotten. Darkness is its cage. Memory is its key. I didn't understand what it meant at first, but slowly I began to piece it together. This thing feeds on awareness, on attention, on being known. The more I thought about it, feared it, or acknowledged it, the stronger it became, the more real it became. That's why it had been sealed. That's why it had been forgotten. And I had remembered it. I tried not to speak about it anymore. Not to say its name, not to revisit the basement, not to think about those eyes. I avoided mirrors. I covered the vent where the whispers grew strongest. I even slept with headphones on, hoping music would drown out the voices. But it was too late. The cracks had formed. One night, the electricity died again, just as I was brushing my teeth. In the mirror, I saw it clearly behind me for the first time. A shape. Human-like, but wrong. No face. Limbs too long. Moving without sound. I turned around, but there was nothing there. Except my reflection. Still smiling. Even though I wasn't. I knew I couldn't face this thing alone anymore. Whatever it was, whatever I had let loose, it was smarter than me, older than me, and it wasn't going away. I needed help. Answers. Protection. Anything. So I reached out. My first call was to Father Gregson, the local priest. I told him part of the truth, strange activity in my home, strange symbols in the basement, and voices in the night. He listened patiently, then offered to come by and bless the house. I welcomed him the next morning. He walked through each room, muttering soft prayers, sprinkling holy water. But the moment he got to the basement door, he paused. His eyes narrowed. He didn't open it, didn't even touch it. He simply stood there for a full minute, then turned to me and said, "There's something old down there. I can feel it pressing through." I asked if he could perform an exorcism or cleansing. He shook his head. "It's not demonic," he said quietly. "It's not even from our scriptures. This is something else. I can't help you." That was the moment I realized even faith had limits here. I turned next to science, if only to prove I wasn't imagining things. I brought in a paranormal investigator I found online. A woman named Lana. She arrived with thermal cameras, EMF detectors, audio recorders, and a calm, grounded demeanor. She spent 3 hours in the house. Recorded strange temperature drops. Captured flickering shadows. At one point, all the batteries in her equipment drained simultaneously, a phenomenon she called a classic sign of an energy feed. But when she reviewed the audio later, her face went pale. She had captured breathing. Not mine. Not hers. Labored. Animal-like. Coming from directly behind her when we were both upstairs. She packed her gear quickly after that. "This thing is not human. And it's not just haunting you, it's attached to you," she said. "You might have fed it. Strengthened it. It's not just in the house anymore." I asked her what that meant. She gave me a chilling answer. "It follows thought. It follows fear." Before she left, she gave me a sealed black pouch. Inside was a talisman, a hand-carved obsidian and ash wrapped in red thread. "Keep this on you. It won't stop it," she said. "But it might buy you time." That night, I wore the talisman and tried to sleep. At 2:47 a.m., I woke up choking. Something was pressing on my chest. I couldn't see it, couldn't move. My eyes darted around. Heart pounding in my ears. Just when I thought I'd pass out, the pressure lifted. I gasped for air, rolled out of bed, and saw something that made my blood run cold. Handprints. On my chest. Long blackened. As if burned into my skin. I ran to the bathroom mirror, lifted my shirt. They were real. I was being marked. I left the house the next morning. Checked into a motel. Told myself I just needed distance, time to think. But the truth was, I was scared to be alone in that place. But the entity wasn't bound to the house anymore. That night at the motel, I found the TV on, blaring static, even though I never touched the remote. The mirror fogged up on its own. And in the mist, a single phrase formed. "I never left. I fled again. This time to my brother's house 2 states away." I didn't tell him what was going on. Just that I needed to get out of town. He welcomed me, gave me a place to rest. But the second night there, he knocked on my door, half asleep. "Hey," he said groggily. "Why were you standing at the foot of my bed last night?" I hadn't gone near his room. Whatever this thing was, it had attached to me. No matter where I ran, it followed. And every time someone else noticed it, even for a moment, it grew bolder. More present. And then I remembered the journal entry again. Memory is its key. It didn't just want to haunt me. It wanted to be known. It wanted me to spread it. I stopped sleeping. Not because I couldn't, but because I was afraid of what might happen if I did. The line between dreams and waking life had begun to blur. I would see things during the day, shapes moving behind trees, reflections that didn't mimic my actions, shadows that pointed the wrong way. At night, it only worsened. I'd hear breathing just outside the door. I'd feel fingers graze my skin, but no one would be there. My world had become a cracked mirror. I couldn't stay with my brother. After the night he caught me standing over his bed, even though I swore I hadn't moved, I knew I had to leave. He never said anything directly, but the way he looked at me after that was different. Like I had become part of whatever was haunting me. I lived in my car for a few days, parked in random lots, barely eating. I didn't want to go back to the house, but it kept calling to me. In dreams. Through whispers on dead phone lines. Once, I turned on the car radio and through the static, I heard my own voice. Let it in. I screamed. Ripped the battery out of my phone. Disconnected the car radio. It didn't matter. It wasn't using technology, it was using me. And then came the hallucinations. At least, I thought they were hallucinations. I'd look into mirrors and see versions of myself that looked wrong, smiling when I wasn't, blinking out of sync. I'd walk past windows and see someone watching me from inside even though the house was empty. On one occasion, I caught my reflection walking away while I stood still. The talisman Lana gave me? It cracked in two, right in my hand. I felt it snap like a ribcage cracking under pressure. I returned to Mrs. Hawthorne in desperation. I begged her for anything, any ritual, any history, any name for what I was dealing with. She made me sit. She didn't speak for a long time. Just looked at me with such deep sorrow, I almost wished she'd yell instead. Finally, she said, you didn't just find it. You remembered it. That's worse. She explained that these entities, these forgotten things, exist in the dark places of the world and the mind. Long ago, they were locked away by people who knew the truth that awareness is a door. That by simply knowing of them, by remembering their shape or whisper or presence, you invite them into our plane. They become real through us. And once remembered, they cannot be unremembered. They root in your mind like a tick, feeding, growing, until they no longer need to hide. I asked her what I could do. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, you must forget, completely, erase everything, or you will become a vessel. At first I laughed. A desperate, broken sound. How do you forget something like this? But she wasn't joking. She gave me a small pouch of herbs. A bitter concoction meant to dull memory, told me to write everything down, every detail, and then burn the pages after drinking the mix. Purge the thoughts. Burn the story. Leave no echo, she said. If even one thread remains, it will return. So I tried. That night, I wrote everything I could remember. From the first night, I saw the door to the whispers in the walls, the dreams, the faces, the voices. I poured it out on page after page until my hands ached. Then I drank the brew. My vision blurred. My skin went cold. Time stretched and warped. I burned the pages. And for a few hours I felt peace. Like waking from a nightmare and forgetting the worst parts. But the peace didn't last. Because something lingered. I found a piece of burned paper left behind. Charred at the edges but legible. Only one word remained. Me. And suddenly, it all rushed back. The door, the light, the voice, the thing in the shadows. It had tricked me. Let me think I was free. Because the truth is, I don't think I ever left the basement. I returned to the house. Not because I wanted to, because I had no choice. Everything else had failed. The priests, the talismans, the memory rituals, all temporary distractions. I realized then that there was no running, no forgetting, no escaping. The entity wasn't attached to the house anymore. It was in me. But something in me had changed too. I wasn't the same frightened person who first discovered the hidden door. I was angry. I was exhausted. I wanted to end it, one way or another. When I walked into the house, the air hit me like a wall. Thick, stale, unnatural. The lights didn't work, but I didn't need them. I knew the layout now. I moved by instinct, straight to the basement. I expected resistance, whispers, cold spots, maybe even that horrible pressure on my chest again. But instead, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The basement door creaked open like it had been waiting for me. I descended the steps, each one groaning under my weight. The air grew colder with every foot. At the bottom, I found the hidden door slightly ajar. That was new. Last time, it had taken force to open. Now, it was inviting me in. The chamber beyond looked the same. The stone walls, the twisted symbols, the strange light pulsing from the cracks in the ground. But something had changed. In the center stood a figure, tall, thin, motionless. The same one from my dreams. No face, no features. But I knew it was looking at me. It didn't move, not even a breath. But the pressure returned, crushing, suffocating, as if my mind itself was being wrung dry. You brought me back, it said. The voice didn't come from its mouth. It didn't have one. It came from inside me, echoing in my chest like a second heartbeat. I stepped forward, heart pounding. What are you? The answer was immediate, and it chilled me deeper than any cold could. I am what you forgot. I am what you feared. I am what you made real. Suddenly, everything clicked. It was never a demon. Never a ghost. It was a thought. The skin stretched. Fingers lengthened. My reflection on the smooth stone wall shifted. My eyes blackened. My bones twisted. The entity didn't want to destroy me. It wanted to replace me. And it almost did. But I fought back. With the last thread of will I had, I pulled something from my coat pocket. Something I had taken from the attic days ago. The original page of the journal. The very first one. The one with the symbol meant to seal the entity away. I held it to my chest and began repeating the phrase written beneath it. Even as my voice cracked. Even as the thing's scream echoed inside me. Even as blood trickled from my nose and eyes. I kept chanting. The light in the chamber pulsed violently. The stone walls groaned. Dust fell from the ceiling. And then darkness. I woke up on the basement floor. The chamber was gone. Nothing but solid concrete surrounded me. No door. No symbols. No light. It had worked. Somehow I had sealed it again. Or maybe it let me go. I don't know how long I stayed down there. But when I finally emerged, the sun was rising. The house felt empty. Not just quiet, truly empty. No more whispers. No more shadows. No more cold. I burned the journal. The drawings. The notes. Everything. Then I sold the house. I moved far away. Started over. Changed my name. But some nights, I still hear the faintest breath just behind my ear. And sometimes, just for a second, I catch my reflection smiling when I'm not.